Can you hear me now? There we go. So, Chairman and Board, for your agenda tonight, most of these items, all of these items actually are related to previous actions that you've taken for the Sports Health and Entertainment District project. So on January 23rd, Council authorized you to consider and approve a financing plan through Preston Hollow Capital. On the 27th of January, you did approve that plan, which sets up the development loan of up to $35 million and the Public Improvement District and Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone of approximately $220 million. On February 6th, Council considered an interlocal agreement, which essentially took the information in that financing plan and memorialized that in form of an interlocal agreement. So that agreement will be between the Cottonwood LGC and Council. And so that is what is before you tonight, is for you to consider under this first item, the interlocal. This is to purchase land that is shown on the map on the right in yellow. Staff is working on and has been working on some loan documents, which is also on your agenda tonight. We are trying to work on an updated project schedule, so hopefully with that I'll be able to kind of give you guys a layout of what may be asked of you in the months to come. Ultimately, the actions tonight get us to that first batch of funding so that we can close on approximately 129 acres of land, which we're anticipated to close on that February 14th. So with that, the interlocal agreement is in the packet. Again, what that does is really just take the information that was in the financing plan and memorialize that as an agreement between the city and the Cottonwood LGC.
Questions, comments, motions?
Move to approve the interlocal agreement between the City of Hutto and the Cottonwood Development Corporation for the Sports Health and Entertainment District as presented.
Second.
So a motion by Member Thornton, second by Member Martinez.
I did have a question before you vote. The alternative Project 380 agreement says within 60 days of the effective date, the city shall enter a grant agreement with the lender, whereby the city shall agree to make grant payments to the lender payable between 75 and 100% of all ad valorem tax proceeds. Could you kind of explain that to me a little bit?
Yeah, and so what we need to do is we would still need to go back and go through the cost, the sources and uses that are associated with the project to determine exactly what type of pledge that would be. What Preston Hollow wanted to essentially do is to have that range put in there of 75 to 100%. What we would need to do over the next month and some change, go through the sources and uses based off of the concept plan and figure out what that gap is to figure out what number we need to plug in for ad valorem to close the gap on the project. Okay. So right now is 60 days. We are trying to see if we can get a little bit more time on that. Just because if I do a 380 agreement now, when we're going to have the PID-TERS loan kind of take that out, if we can match up the timing, then really we don't need to do the 380, but this right now is just a precaution in line with the financing plan. Okay. But essentially, once we go back and go through the sources and uses, we'll figure out exactly what that number is. Okay. We can't lock it in right now until such time as we can come to council and say, this is the exact amount that we'll need.
Gotcha. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Call for vote.
Doug Gall.
Aye.
Dan Thornton.
Aye.
Patty Martinez.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Next item is 3B, consider and approve assignment of contracts to Preston Hollow Financial in connection with a Sports Health and Entertainment District financing transaction.
And so for this item and the remaining items, what I'll have up on the screen is just the list of the documents that will be associated with that. I'm going to turn it over to Bill to kind of walk you through what those agreements do. Again, these agreements are all related to the financing for the Sports Health and Entertainment District project.
Right. Board members, essentially this is part of the collateral for the loan that Preston Hollow is making. And they requested that all the contracts be assigned as collateral. That means that if we default, if the corporation defaults, they get the right to go take over those contracts. So those contracts include the real estate contracts. We've got 2 which will close on Friday, and they'll no longer be a contract. We have master developer agreements with Legacy and with Perfect Games. And so those will be assigned, and those are the development agreements that where they intend to perform to build the project. And then those are the 2 other agreements that are being assigned. This is kind of a routine thing that lenders require, that if they have to step into the project, they've got all the pieces that go with the project. I'd be glad to discuss any of those if you wish.
So are the, those who we are in contract, have contracts with, are they made aware of this, like in case we were to default and they were, Preston Hollow had to step in and take over those contracts? Are they advised of that in the future, that that's a possibility, or is it just kind of one of those things where it happens when it happens?
Well, they've had to sign consents to assignments. So at least their attorneys have been supplied with this, and they have signed the consents. So they are aware of this.
Okay.
I mean, as a practical matter, for example, the 2 real estate contracts, we're going to close those on Friday. So the sellers, as long as they get their money, they really do not care about the assignment of the contract.
Sure. Okay.
But the other 2, the master development and the multi-party agreement, they specifically signed consents to the assignment, so they are aware.
Okay. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Martinez, second by Board Member Thornton. Call for vote.
Doug Gall,
Aye.
Dan Thornton,
Aye.
Patty Martinez.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Next item is 3C, consider and approve environmental indemnity agreement in conjunction with financing of the Sports, Health, and Entertainment District.
This is an agreement also required by Preston Hollow as the lender. This is a fairly standard agreement that lenders require. What it says in a number of pages is that we have investigated the property and do not find any environmental issues, that is, hazardous substances, those kinds of things. And if we do, we, the corporation, promises to clean it up if we find it. Now, we have had what's called a phase 1 environmental done on each of these tracks, where the unrecognized expert inspects both the records and the property and told us before we close that there are no environmental hazards on there, environmental waste, those kinds of things. So we're relying upon the inspector, and we are representing to the lender that we have done this and do not find any environmental issues.
Okay.
So we'll have to update that with the agreement as well, which they're doing right now. They've done all of it, and some of them, since they were done in the summertime, they just go out and recertify it and say, yes, the conditions have not changed, we're the same. And so it's kind of just like a restamp of the environmental studies that they have done.
How deep do they go? Do you know?
They look at everything from what is currently the use of the land. If there was like an oil well or something like that, they're going to look and see whether or not that was still active. I believe they do look at the soils as well of that. The ones that we've had have said that there are no issues. There was one where I think there was an old well, which they said was inactive, so it did not cause any issues or concerns with theirs.
They also go back into the title based on the title policy, and they look at who owned the land in the past. So, for example, if 20 years ago a chemical company operated on the land, that's something the Phase 1 environmental would look at, and in this case, they didn't find anything like that. This has basically been used as farmland just about as far back as there's title.
But tell them what they've sprayed on there over the years.
That's what, yeah, that's what's my concern. Because if you think about the co-op site, that was farmland too.
Well, it was also a storage where they had, and that's where we got caught in. Got caught on this property. You actually had storage of tanks and storage of stuff also on this property.
And
It
they
wasn't just
entered,
spraying it on there.
They interview the previous owners too and just say, what crops have you grown on it over the past couple of years and how did you treat it?
Oh, okay.
They look at that part too.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think even for one of these, I had to call the previous owner and just say, hey, can you help out with some of the questions that the
But there is soil
study
testing
has.
involved too. Okay. Okay. All the questions I have.
Any other questions?
So just curious on that, so the time period on this, when this goes to the PID TERS financing, this goes away basically, right? And it becomes, TERS takes over at that point?
So the $35 million loan,
Yeah.
once the PID TERS loan comes into play, it takes out the $35 million.
Right, so this is basically this is saying
Yeah.
in that period until that happens.
This is the short
Several
term.
The lender's
months.
not responsible for anything that turns up on the land, the corporation is.
In between that time,
Yeah.
all we have to do
or
is
the
say,
lender has the right to say it's in default, and then they can either ask for the money back or
which
the
they
remedies that are in the
would
agreement.
know that before we get to that point because they're getting copies of all the environmentals as well.
Well, but it says if something comes up that we didn't know about. I mean, something could come up at any point in this time period that we don't know about.
What do you think, Phil?
You know, if we start digging, to lay the fields and something pops
Yeah.
up that we didn't know about,
Yep.
it's not their responsibility, which makes sense anyway. They're just loaning the money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Bill?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the environmental indemnity agreement in connection with financing of the Sports, Health, and Entertainment District.
Second.
A motion by Board Member Martinez, second by Board Member Thornton. Call for vote.
Doug Gall.
Aye.
Dan Thornton.
Aye.
Patty Martinez.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Now,
Next item is 3D, update and possible action to approve financial documents required by Preston Hollow in conjunction with the Sports, Health, and Entertainment District financing transaction.
we have one other agreement, and it's about 5 pages from the back of your package. It's called an inter-creditor agreement. You may remember that on the Weiss track, which the corporation now owns, that the Butler Trust interest made a loan to the corporation to buy that tract 4 to 6 months ago, give or take. The loan of $4.5 million. The lender, Preston Hollow, is getting a second lend on that tract, and of course, when we get the second installment of funding, we'll pay that Butler loan off. So what this agreement says is that the Butlers consent to the second lend, which they have, and secondly, that we would give, if there's any default in the first lend, then they would give notice, and the second lend holder would be entitled to come pick it up or cure the default. That's essentially what this multi-page agreement does. So we would ask you to approve that also.
So this motion is approving all five of these documents.
The
loan
one,
agreement, promissory note, deed of
The
trust, all that.
motion say approve the inter-creditor agreement as presented.
So is it, but it
So I'll
says to approve
clarify
the
too.
financial documents. So
I'll clarify. So on the loan agreement, promissory note, and the deeds of trust, those are documents that we've been working on, but generally the approval that we received from the board on this was done at the January 27th meeting, and we've been working on those documents since then. The intercreditor agreement is one that a new one that came up due to that lien that we needed to have the board approved.
Okay, so it's just the one document.
It's the one that you have not approved yet.
Okay.
We put that general language, all documents, because there's always something that comes up at the last minute, and this is the
Give you
one
that, yeah.
that came up. We just wanted to be
Just in
sure
case you had that.
if there were 3 others, we could present them to you. So this is the one that came up.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Board Member Martinez,
Second.
second by Board Member Thornton, to approve the intercreditor agreement as presented. Call for vote.
Doug Gall.
Aye.
Dan Thornton.
Aye.
Patty Martinez.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. I'm so used to it for 7. I'm like, it stopped at 3, and it's like, wait a minute, is there more?
I know.
I'm waiting for more names to come.
It's a little
smoother than last time.
So with that being said, we have nothing else on the agenda, so we will adjourn this meeting at 6:01 p.m. We're adjourned.